All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. And as promised, an extraordinarily special guest, the former mayor of New York City, the private attorney to President Trump. You all know him as the America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Welcome here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, John. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
And great to have you on as well. So you had a big week last week. You released some very important information that had a profound impact on the election. Tell me what you're seeing 10 days out after releasing the emails and other information from the hard drive. Are you seeing this cut through at all with voters?
I am. Obviously, I'm not seeing what I should be seeing if this country really were a democracy, which is this should have been projected by every single major news source. It's legitimate news. But despite that, I think the presence on social media. Also, I've been doing a lot of local radio and television.
Right.
So I go around them. And there you get quite a good reception because they're so shocked at what they're being denied that you get a double reaction. There's a reaction to the criminality of the Bidens, which is extensive. And then there's a reaction to how could we have this kind of censorship in America? We're supposed to be, this is like being in communist China. I think that might even be the stronger reaction. It's a little bit easier for people to kind of pick up.
It's pretty remarkable. When you boil down the Biden family finances and what Hunter Biden was done, and for the average Joe sitting on the assembly line in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or at the bar, or the soccer mom taking their kids to their next game, what's the core issue that you've seen now that you've dug so deep into these emails?
Well, I think that the emails corroborate what you and I and several others always suspected. This is not a one-off. This is a 30-year conspiracy arrangement in which Joe Biden used his family, because he could trust them, to sell his public office, retain the money, give him as much as he needs to live, but then buy things for him. So you take the long look at it, and you say, how could a senator own 5 homes on a senator's salary and a teacher's salary, and 5 rather magnificent homes? The answer is because some of those homes are being bought by his son with Joe's money, but the son holding on to it. Also, text that summarizes it about as well as I've ever seen a racketeering case summarized by a defendant. He's writing this to his daughter, who's apparently thinking about taking over his role as a bagman. I love all of you, but I don't receive any respect, and that's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. I hope you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. It's really hard. But don't worry, unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. So that's the arrangement. The arrangement is you're going to lobby for MBNA Bank. In fact, he was known as Senator MBNA. You're going to lobby against bankruptcy reform, which every Democrat was for, but Joe Biden.
Right.
And MBA Bank gives your son a $170,000, $180,000 a year job right out of law school, makes him a vice president right out of law school. He shows up every once in a while. So you could legitimately call it a no-show job. And Hunter, out of that, has to kick back half of that to the old man.
And that's Hunter's
James
own words.
Did the same thing.
That's the most important thing here, right? This is an email from
Hunter's
Hunter Biden off his hard drive to his sister, correct?
Exactly, because they're kind of taking over some of this role. So over the years, the senator has used his brother, his sister-in-law, possibly his other brother, and Hunter. He doesn't like to use outsiders. And that's how we end up with let's go to the last conspiracy. And that's the one involving the Chinese communists. That, I'm convinced, was a Chinese communist plot to inveigle him in a front company so they could own him. They set up a company, half Biden's, half Chinese communists. The Bidens are going to make introductions. For making introductions, they're going to get $30 million a year. And then there's a division of equity in the contract. And behind the contract, there's a term sheet. The The term sheet gives 10% of the equity, overall equity, to the big guy.
Right.
And then you find documents throughout. If you search for them, you search the big guy, and you pull out references to him as the big guy, made by Hunter Biden, made by friends of Hunter Biden, saying the big guy just gave a great speech. So that's clearly him. And Mr. Bobulinski has now testified, who is the CEO of the company, that Biden was the big guy. And also that idea that Biden didn't talk about Hunter's foreign business has been a complete lie for 10 years. And that relates back to the Ukraine, actually, where with the documents out, we show that he had a meeting with one of the high-level officials in Burisma.
Right.
But Mr. Bobulinski says they discussed all of Hunter's foreign business. He had the impression that Joe was orchestrating it.
When you look at this, there's two pots of documents that have come out in the last couple of weeks, and they're both identical in both content and substance and in the way the Biden family business is described. You've got your set, which is from the laptop believed to be Hunter Biden's, that was left at a repair shop in Delaware. It tells one story, and almost identically, although there's different emails in different sectors, there is the emails and text messages released by Mr. Bobulinski. What makes Mr. Bobulinski so interesting, Toto Bobulinski, he was CEO of one of these Biden companies, one that was created in 2017 to do business with China. You've seen two things happen. We see now from the Delaware businessman the fact that the grand jury subpoena that took the hard drive from him and examined it in December 2019, that the alleged predicate for that subpoena was money laundering. And then we've now been told that Mr. Bobulinski's been asked to be interviewed by the FBI. Do you have any confidence that there's an ongoing criminal investigation right now involving these matters?
Well, they waited 10 months to investigate this. They had it for 10 months. The only way they started investigating it is by my making it public and going to the Delaware police and kicking them in the backside.
Right.
I guess they're doing something, but there are a lot of questions to be asked. And money laundering investigation takes a very, very long time. There are enough things on this email trail and text message trail that should be published by the main newspapers for the American people to evaluate. The American people should evaluate what I just read about 30 years of taking care of expenses and kicking back the salary. They should evaluate the thing about 10% for Mr. Big. There's also a text message to all the Bobulinski people from Mr. Galliars. Never mention Joe Biden's name. That's in writing.
Wow.
Now, you don't mention Joe Biden's name. That's one of the clear indications of guilt in a criminal trial. You'd be able to get a judge to charge a jury that when people conceal names, that's circumstantial evidence that they are involved with the crime in a knowing and guilty way. I mean, there's so much evidence here. The American people should be allowed to examine it, and it should be dissected by fair and honest reporters, because you have Iraq, James Biden is the bag man. You go to Ukraine, it's Hunter Biden with a small deal for James. You go to Kazakhstan, it's Hunter Biden, possibly James. You go to Romania, it's Hunter Biden. Then you go to China, and it's the whole crew, because that's where the big money is. China was paying James, Hunter, Sarah, and Joe, the big guy. Or four. If we could get the facts of those four out, it proves that Joe Biden is the most corrupt vice president in our history that we know of. Spiro Agnew was a small-time, guy taking thousands. This guy's taking somewhere near $30 and $40 million, according to mine. And I know there are other emails, other texts. For example, that $3.5 million from Moscow. All I have is the proof that it was paid. All of those documents, I think, are being analyzed now by Peter Schweiker and his associate. I believe it's a money laundering operation, but I don't have those documents except a few references to it.
So, yeah, that's a third pot of documents that belong to Devin Cooney, who was another business associate of Hunter Biden, and Devin Archer, who were business associates on so many different things. I want to go to that for a second. One of the remarkable things that we now know is that Hunter Biden was doing business all through the years that Joe Biden was vice president with somebody who's now a convicted felon, someone who was convicted in 2018 of fleecing a Indian tribe through a fraudulent scheme, and fleecing him through an account at Morgan Stanley that Hunter Biden and Devin Archer, the convict, were using jointly. Both of them were getting money out of the account. Do you have any concern? What's your reaction to the fact that Hunter Biden sort of escapes the scrutiny in that trial? I mean, there are references to him from time to time, but it's as though Hunter Biden didn't exist for the purpose of the trial. Do you have concerns about what SDNY, the U.S. Attorney in New York, did to narrow that case?
Sure, absolutely. I have concerns about that. I have concerns about the judge's opinion. After they were all convicted,
right, the
judge dismissed the verdict and then was summarily reversed by the Second Circuit. And the judge has very strong political ties to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party.
Sure. Yeah, and it was that very account.
It looks like a. I mean, there was no basis for the reversal.
Right.
Also, the Southern District is not what we would call squeezing Devin Archer. In a situation like this, when you've got all this evidence, I mean, Mr. Bobolinsky is talking. Devin Archer could tell you the whole thing. You got him on the ropes, convicted. I don't know of any attempts to get him to cooperate. They're certainly not doing to him what they did to Paul Manafort and locking him in solitary confinement and questioning him every 3 days. Yeah. I don't recommend that.
Right.
But I'm trying to give you an idea that this is not exactly an enthusiastic investigation.
Two different
standards. They were very enthusiastic about going after Mr. Cohen, however. I mean, they raided his home at 4 a.m. They had him in for questioning, 2-3 times a day. They leaked a tremendous amount of information about him. There is a definite anti-Trump, Trump derangement syndrome section within the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And when you look out now, we have a body of evidence where Hunter Biden's acknowledging giving 50% of his business proceeds to the vice president for many, many years. You've got an allocation chart suggesting that the vice president was due to get 10% of an investment involving the Communist Chinese in 2017. But then you get Joe Biden's financial disclosure forms, and tax returns, you don't see any of this money there. That's the missing link. And so as a former prosecutor, what's the next step? How do you find, if there was money going to Joe Biden, which you can't see in the public record, how would you find that? How would you go about doing that as a former federal prosecutor?
First thing I do is I reconstruct how he bought those homes. Where did the money come from the homes? Did it come from him? Did it come from Hunter? Did it come from other family members who were bagmen? Maybe you could trace that to specific payments that were made by some of these countries. I mean, they had money coming in virtually 14, 15, 20 times a year when he was vice president. It was really very profitable for the Bidens to monetize his public office. So you start tracing that money. How much money? Now, a lot of the money, I have to tell you, got wasted on crack and on other drugs. Hunter spent hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on. Some of it appears to be crack, some of it alcohol, some of it's entertainment, some of it's prostitutes. But 30% of that is probably gone in that hole. But yeah, you could trace it that way. There's no question, the rule is follow the money.
Right.
But you have to have the documents and you have to have the will to do it. We have the documents. Nobody wants to do it.
Yeah.
I think they think it'll be the end of their career. They believe, if you investigate Trump, then the media cheers for you and makes you, Comey was a hero. I mean, Comey could be the worst director of the FBI in our history, and they made him a hero because he was going after Trump. It didn't matter that he was going after him illegally, unethically. Just go after Trump and you're a hero. Go after Biden or Hillary and you're a Russian spy or I'm a henchman. I'm not even sure I know what that. I think a henchman. What do henchmen do? Do they like kill people or?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I've never met a henchman yet.
I mean, they say this. They say this.
Probably a good thing.
They say the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
And they never ever deal with the evidence.
Right.
Not one time have they said that any of these emails or texts are untrue.
That's the
one I
key,
read to you about half going to the father and paying the expenses. They haven't denied that.
Right.
But what that, I mean, there's an investigatory task that's just obvious. He's telling you what to investigate.
Yeah.
Go take a look at the expenses for the last 30 years.
Right.
It reminds me of a net worth income tax case. They actually put a major gangster in jail once that way. He claimed he had no money. So they went out and they showed how much he spent that year. And they recreated his income based on his expenses. Well, you could do that with Joe. You could do a net worth case. How much does he own? Is it out of whack with his income? And then if it is, then you go look for the answer to the question, where did it come from? It's going to have come from James, Sarah, Hunter. I doubt that he moved out of the family. There's another part to this. There's a certain sympathy for Hunter, which I share in a way, because we go way back to when he was 22, 23, 24, and they put him in that vice president's job at MBNA Bank. And he was a vice president right out of law school, never showed up for work. He had a drug problem from the very beginning. So now you're his father. You got two choices, right? One choice is you get him into a really good program and you keep him out of anything complicated. You don't stress his life more than it has to be. Instead, out of reasons of greed, because of his own narcissism, he takes his son and he puts him in the most stressful kind of business he could possibly be in, dealing with world-class criminals who were involved in murder. Mykola Zlochevsky, member of Ukrainian organized crime, master criminal, under tremendous pressure with Zlochevsky of getting caught. Then he moves on to Elena Buturina, who's the widow of the mayor of Moscow who helped depose the mayor. So this is quite a character. He's very close to Putin, and he made her the richest woman in Russia. This is not somebody a drug addict should be dealing with if you want to cure him. And as I said, the last partner of his is sitting below the Yangtze River. So
all the Chinese,
some of his partners go to jail. Right? Some of his partners get killed. You can't tell me this is the way you rehabilitate a drug addict. There's no wonder by the time he's 40, he's lost all his teeth. And there's a picture of him with no teeth, and they have to put teeth in for him. How can a father do this to his son?
Let me ask you a question that has perplexed me. If you're Hunter Biden and you know your dad's running for vice president, if the story's true that he left this hard drive behind at the Delaware repair shop, do you have a theory why he would have left it behind and never come to pick it up? It seems like a very reckless thing to do. Have you developed any theories in talking to the shop owner and developing evidence as to why in the summer or spring of 2019 he just leaves behind such a sensitive piece of equipment with sensitive data on it?
Well, I know there's a lot of speculation. I mean, sort of amateur psychology that maybe he's doing it because he wants to be caught. He wants the father to be caught. That would be supported by some very poignant emails and texts about this, where he does reflect on how his father misused him and is angry about it. I mean, even this small text that I read to you, you can see a certain amount of anger in how he was misused. But I can't tell you that's the reason. He's also a consistent drug addict and alcoholic. So he could have forgotten.
Yeah, by his own admission. Yeah, he's talked about that.
Actually, I do think that the shop owner actually thought that was the case.
Yeah.
So I think he just forgot it until the magic moment when it resurfaced, and they must have put him in a room and said, "Hunter, what is this?"
One of the things after all the body of evidence has come out, a lot of it's come out belatedly, right? We started a year and a half, 2 years ago. I started working on Burisma. I know you did. And now we have a much larger picture of what the Biden family enterprise looked like. When you look at that text message that you messaged, if that's Hunter Biden's text message, or message about the 50% going to his father. There was a poignant moment in his ABC interview where he talked about not only that he when asked, did you get the job at Burisma in Ukraine because of your family name? He said, yeah, probably. I think he said something to the fact that a lot of things that came my way because of my family name. When you look back at that statement now in that interview, and then you look at the body of evidence, does that appear to be the case, that the Biden family name was a calling card that you could go anywhere in the world and try to do business with?
Absolutely. The way I describe it is, this is a crime family. Their income is monetizing his public office, and they look for every opportunity to do it. They do it through lobbying. They do it through business deals. But the remarkable thing is how it was ignored when it was done at the highest levels of government. I mean, the American people should have known in 2015, when Joe Biden was negotiating very serious deals with China to try to get them out of the islands they disputed with Japan, to get the tariffs down. They should have known that his son was signing up a $1.5 billion private equity fund for him and Whitey Bulger's nephew and the Bank of China. We have someone negotiating for us against China whose son is a business partner of the Bank of China.
Yeah.
And we don't know about it? And Obama doesn't know about it?
Yeah.
If he doesn't know about it, he's got one pathetic intelligence service.
Well,
if he did know about it, it amounts to fraud not to tell the American people that.
It's a pretty remarkable thing. Now, there's an interesting gap, right? You have concerns that the U.S. Attorney and the FBI had this hard drive for a year. Doesn't look like much happened. There's clearly a gap between these emails showing Hunter Biden thought he was giving large portions of his money to Joe Biden and the actual money changing hands to Joe Biden. If you don't have confidence in the FBI, do you think it's incumbent upon Attorney General Barr to name a special counsel, or can this be done internally within the Justice Department without having to have another Robert Mueller-like type investigation?
I would like to say it could be done within the Justice Department, but I'd have to say that they've shown to us that they're not capable of doing it. They have too many people in the Justice Department who either still carry over Trump derangement syndrome, they just haven't been discovered, or they have too many people that are afraid that their reputations will be ruined if they make a case on Joe Biden. And we know that that's not an exaggeration, John, because we've seen them try to do it to us and other people.
Anyone who goes up and tries to explore this certainly gets a blowback. There's no doubt about that. I think you and I and others who have done it have felt that blowback. I want to switch gears for 1 second to one more sensitive part on the hard drive evidence that you have. You went to Delaware Police a week ago. You raised concerns about material on the hard drive, raising questions about the safety, child endangerment of a teenager. I want to be very careful because we don't identify alleged child victims of sex crimes. But one of the things that I know is important under Delaware law and under most state laws is that if you make such a report, there's usually a requirement within 24 or 48 hours that police go check on the welfare of the child or talk to the parents of that child. Again, not identifying the child at all, but do you have any sense that the police in Delaware have done anything to follow up and check on the well-being of that child that you had concerns about based on the evidence on that hard drive?
None. The only evidence I have is they brought it up to the AG of Delaware, who is a political crony of Biden's, pretty much owned by him. And she punted it to the FBI, which is, of course, the very organization that wasn't investigating. And the reason we went to them is because the FBI wasn't going to do it. So I guess we were given the classic runaround. The tragedy of that is there's another there's another text. This one is to his father. The date is September 23rd, 2018. And he admits that I create and caused a very unsafe environment for the kids.
Yeah.
Well, with that admission, I have been told by now 3 different experts on child endangerment that this is almost a mandatory report. This is a mandatory reporting requirement. If someone in a hospital or law enforcement saw this, they would commit a crime if they didn't
They
report
had an obligation to check on the well-being. Are you
and
going
you
to
have
do
to
anything?
act on it. You just can't say,
Yeah.
"Oh, gee, it's not true."
Right.
You got to go find
Or
out.
it's politically sensitive, right? It doesn't matter, right? These things are beyond politics.
And you don't have to go too far to find out what it was.
Right.
You just open its photographs, and it's filled with some of the most obscene, disgusting stuff.
Yep.
And it is filled with a large number of pictures of underage girls.
Yeah.
Way more than a normal male should have. And the single most photographed person in the 29,000 photos is this particular young lady.
Yeah. Well, do you do anything? Is there anything more you can or are contemplating doing, going back to Delaware police, going to the court to make sure that the child protection issue has been at least adjudicated or addressed in a way? Or is that a dead end? Is there nothing more you can do as
I don't
the
know that it's a dead end. We're pursuing things that we can do and trying to get more evidence of it,
right,
so that we can present more of it and reignite it. I don't know what else we're going to have to produce other than his statement that I'm a danger to the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a real story here, though, that Joe Biden all throughout is the enabler, and his political career comes first. So why does he use the relatives for the briberies? Because they can be trusted better. He doesn't get it out of his family and go find a couple of bums in Washington, of which there are many who would do it for him, because he can't trust him as much.
Yeah,
why does this not get dealt with effectively? Because he doesn't want the bad publicity, because he's running for president. This family has been destroyed by his blind ambition and greed. He's destroyed this family over that. This family is not a healthy family, and it's a tragedy.
Yeah, there's no doubt the family business was extensive and so uniquely tied to the foreign policy responsibilities. You know, there are lots of other countries they could have gone and made money in, but Joe Biden's portfolio is China, it's Russia, it's Ukraine, and it seems as though they targeted the very area that Joe Biden had a policy thing. And now you can see why those State Department officials during the impeachment went out of their way to say that Joe Biden created a conflict of interest for them, because they saw the family coming in right behind the vice president's portfolio. I want to switch real quickly to one other thing, because you're such an important advisor to the president on the outside. What does President Trump need to do in the final 8 days of the election to try to win re-election? What are the key things in this final stretch that he has to do to win re-election?
Well, I think ultimately this is a choice as to who do you want to run your country, and he's got to convince them that he's the hope for the future. That's a combination of positive and negative, right? Point out what he's done, which he's doing. He's pointing it out, how that sets him up to do what has to be done.
Right.
And even with a tremendous attack on our economy, the recovery is already way, way ahead of what anybody thought. I mean, he's already showing the kind of magic he has in dealing with the economy by getting our unemployment down to a number that is not recessionary, not the depression they suggested. It's a number that we've had in normal times, 8%. He's grown jobs each month by record numbers. Stock market is remaining at record levels. Our GDP has not been affected greatly. And I think we've had the strongest recovery of any nation on earth, unless you want to actually believe that China grew by 4%, which that's like half of China grew by 4%. The other half of China is starving.
Yeah, there's a lot of people cast out.
Other than China's phony report, there's nobody even close to us on economic recovery.
Yeah. When you look at the early voting, I think
that's what he has to do.
When you look at the early voting totals, what do you does the president have enough of a get out the vote operation to overcome whatever the Democrats achieved early on?
I was very worried about the early voting until I realized you can vote in person.
Yeah.
And apparently, yes, the Democrats are dominating the mail-in, but then by almost equal numbers, the Republicans are dominating the walk-in voting. Yeah. Also, we out-registered them in many states by a couple 100,000. So we have a lot more new Republicans than they have new Democrats. So, of course, the polls bother you because you see them all the time, but you do have to have the experience of last time. These polls are closer than they were when he won last time.
Right. And
last time, the reason he won was that he had more enthusiasm. This time, he has more enthusiasm. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're conducting spontaneous demonstrations in states where he has no chance to win.
Right. New York
Just
City,
to
right?
show.
Yeah.
New York City and Los Angeles yesterday.
Right.
Beverly Hills, gigantic demonstration.
Yeah.
More than Joe Biden. More people were at the Beverly Hills demonstration than Joe Biden has seen through the entire campaign.
It is
so
remarkable. Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what is the effect of enthusiasm on a poll and how many extra people does it bring out to vote. And this traveling that he's doing, because I did it with him in 2016. This is magic. I mean, we won Michigan, and I think we won Michigan because we were supposed to stop campaigning at midnight. Ronna McDaniel called up and said, we have a crowd at the airport. And he said, oh, let's do one more. And he only won by less than 1%. And everybody says, had he gone to Minnesota instead of Michigan, he would have won Minnesota.
Isn't that something?
So he had to pick the one which he thought was better.
Yeah.
I think this time he's not going to miss anybody.
Yeah, he's clearly got, his schedule is 3-4 times what Joe Biden, 6 times what Joe Biden.
But these rallies, what they don't realize about these rallies, this is what drives you to produce for him above and beyond the call of duty.
Yeah.
These people will all vote sitting out there in the cold. They'll also get people to vote. They're inspired. And positive inspiration is always much better than negative, like 2-3 to 1. Yeah. So that's where I think his secret weapon is, and that's why I think he's going to win.
It'll be interesting to see. 8 days out. Mr. Mayor, we want to stay in touch with you because obviously you've been working this hard. Is there anything we should?
I do too.
Last question: is there anything we should be looking for in the next 3 or 4 days as this plays out? Do you look at the Justice Department? Do you look at Delaware Police? Where are the places that Americans should look for the next development in the Biden family business controversy that are now front and center?
I think that the Delaware State Police and the FBI owe the American people an explanation of what they've done to secure the children and what their investigatory plan is, and how are we going to get information that we're going to need in order to make a decision on this election. There has to be some kind of an interim report about this, because the only reason it's late is their fault, not ours. They've had it for a year, and they have a lot more than this, by the way. Yeah. They have all my documents that I gave them that they have not done a single thing to investigate in 10 months. And we know the Southern District had large elements of this way back 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep. Yeah, there's no doubt when they got all the documents from Rosemont Seneca Bohai, the firm by which the Indian fraud allegedly occurred. That's the same place that the Burisma money came in. It's the same place that many of these other transfers we're hearing about came in. And so they clearly have had familiarity with these financial transactions for a long time. And I guess the big question for the American people is, what have they done about it? And I guess we'll find out in the coming days. Sir, I want to thank you very much for taking the time today, and we hope to get you back on the show soon. Congratulations with your podcast, too, Common Sense. I know lots of people are watching that every day.
And I know lots that watch you, including me.
Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we're going to wrap things up. We'll come back in a few seconds after these commercial breaks.